Our next speaker is no stranger to building at the frontier of technology and community. David Kobrosky founded Intros AI in 2020, creating AI agents that help online communities engage more deeply and meaningfully. After raising multiple rounds of venture capital and partnering with companies like Squarespace, Morning Brew, and Techstars, Intros AI was acquired by Bevy in 2025. Today, David is the senior product manager at Bevy and is leading the company's AI initiatives. In this session, David will unpack how AI is changing the way we measure and prove the value of community, shifting the ROI conversation from support deflection to revenue impact. So get ready for some stories, some frameworks, and a fresh playbook for community strategy in the AI era. Please join me in welcoming David Kobrosky.
Hello.
Welcome,
Thank you so
David.
much, Beth. Awesome.
We're excited to have you.
Yeah, good to be here. Seems like it's been quite a exciting day so far. There's zero chance I will be able to match Vincent's energy that from the last session here, but gonna do my best regardless. And yeah, excited to get into it. A lot to cover, and this is a topic that I think is really impacting everyone, right? How we're finding a way to, in the age of AI, to better prove that we are driving value for organizations, companies, and I think there's a lot of other higher level dynamics that we'll get into as well. So we'll dive in. But yeah, Beth, anything else you want to cover before I take it away? I can share my screen and we can go for it.
No, I'm excited. I think this is going to be a wonderful perspective as well. I mean, a lot of people are talking about AI, but it's nice to hear from someone who's been deep in the weeds of building AI for community, and how you do it human first while still using AI to its full ability. So I'm excited. Take it away.
All right, sweet. Let's get into it. So let me share my screen here, and feel free along the way. If you're stopping in, send a message in the chat. I'll try to get to questions along during the presentation. Some I might hold for afterwards, but yeah, it's mostly presentation today, and I'll be talking through and giving examples and what I've seen work at a few different companies as far as how they think about both measuring it, ROI, some use cases for it. There's a lot more that we're not going to get to that, it's just a really deep area where it goes beyond. There's just so many different ways that different companies think about the way that community drives value for the organizations, whether it's on the product side, from insights to the support side, whether it's deflection or more non-transactional, but best practices, showing this advocacy angle, marketing, whether it's top of funnel, mid funnel. There's all these different angles. So all that said is, feel free to throw questions in the Q&A as I think Beth mentioned here. So we'll get into it. All right, sharing screen. Okay, we'll do this tab, AI for ROI. All right, you should be able to see my screen here. Throw a comment up if you can't, but it should be good. Okay, so getting into it, the plan today is going to be getting into historical ROI measurement. So this is really, communities have been around since, online communities at least, since far before the 2000s, right? This is mid to late, I guess 80s, 90s is I guess when a lot of the forums started, and then through early 2000s it really picked up, and then we started thinking about this. Companies started having these forums in a way that was tried to be tied to return, really late 2000s to early 2010s, and then the last 10, 15 years there's been some pretty good ways that we've thought about measuring ROI. And then starting really last year is where AI dynamics started shifting things, right? Late 2022 is through 2023, we kind of AI started being a thing, but it didn't really impact community until really early last year. And then it's happening, a lot's happened last year or two. And then now there's a question of how that shifts strategy, and then eventually shifts how we think about ROI. Let me go back to the public chat. All right, just to have, okay, good. So we've always been valued B2B customer communities for engagement, support, loyalty, but proving that it's just challenging. And this isn't just, it's not just within communities objectively, it's I think relative to other industries where especially in go-to-market or like sales, it's supposed to be pretty clear how the actions and the activities done leads to revenue. So in community versus other industries, this will be quick. If you're a community expert, don't worry, stick around. We'll get by this in just a minute. So most industries, your value is a straight line. Let's say we're selling ads. The whole pitch is pretty straightforward. It's like, hey, you give a couple $100, people see ad, and then hope is that you end up making more than a couple $100 from the products they buy and the profit from that. So it's pretty straightforward. It's like people see ad, they buy a product. Usually in community, and not in all cases, but in most cases, there's like one step in between the activity and the things that people are experiencing versus like what the outcome is. So one of the hundreds of ways you can examples of that is like, let's say someone joins the community, and because they join the community, now they are they go to an event or they build trust and loyalty with the brand. Like, oh I like what Culture Amp's online community. I'm going to become a customer because I have deeper trust and loyalty with this company, and then they actually end up buying a product. So you have this extra step here. What that means is that attribution is just really tricky in a way that it's not as hard in other industries. So a lot of times execs and people who are making decisions about where budgets go, it's harder for them to justify to themselves that you should give money to community, because oftentimes the story isn't quite as clear. Sometimes they really get it, but usually if they get it, it's an intuitive get. They're like, oh, that makes sense to me. Like, we need to have a brand and an ecosystem, and there's a lot of like a handful of other benefits we get from this. Sure, we'll put $500,000 a year into that, or $1 million a year into that, right? But rarely is it because they really like truly understand and like see the metrics in front of them. And we're coming up in an era where that's becoming more essential. So it's a high level kind of setting here. Once again, feel free to throw any notes or comments in the be it backstage or Q&A here. All right, now there's plenty of ways community value is created today and has been. So whether it's marketing and sales, some of the common ones, you think about lead generation. So you have a community for let's say we're selling to product managers. So we're selling to. You have a community to discuss best practices in product management. I, as a PM, end up going there, and then that company sees me coming to that community, and they're like, wait a second, David could be a customer of ours. It's a way they may reach out, or I might be like, oh, this is valuable to me, I'll become a customer, right? So it's a lead magnet. Another way to think of it is a valuable touch point. Usually when you think about qualifying leads, a large part of it is scoring the chances that someone's actually interested in buying the product, and a community can be a touch point, which leads into this larger score for a community, right? Retention, it's a classic one we think a lot about. My old company or company before was acquired by Bevy, had this whole, we had a few case studies. One was with Morning Brew, where we're able to show how those who used our product were 3 times more likely to rebuy courses from Morning Brew. And not only that, but we're able to increase the overall repurchasing rate is around 30, somewhere between 30 and 40%. I'm blanking the exact numbers, but the main message there is like, you can be able to say, hey, this led to repurchasing or like higher rates of whatever that thing that the company's tracking. You have your products, right? So insights, feedback, things like that. Time savings. Maybe you're spending a lot of time in support, but customers support each other. And then awareness is always also classic, whether it's brand, word of mouth. A lot goes on in that space. So there's different ways of looking at it based on the type of customer community you have. You may focus on one area versus another. And ideally, you can attribute value in all these, and ideally more, right? This is just kind of the surface of like some of the core things that B2B companies look at when it comes to value. Now, the thing here that's happening is AI is changing the dynamics, and this is tricky. And let's see here. Thank you, Ray. I also saw you posted or question in the public chat. So I'll take a second look at this. So don't more people join a community after purchasing the product? Yeah, good point. Very good point. So I think that comes into the retention side of it. So let's say someone buys your product and then they join the community. Now there's another question. Oftentimes it's enablement. It's like, okay, this person bought the product. How do we get them to like time to value as fast as possible? So for example, I'm a PM, I join a PM community, I become a customer, or let's say I'm a PM, I become a customer, then I join the community. they may look at, okay, David joined this community. He uses our product board which is a company that I currently use, where it's helpful for like getting product feedback and then just using that feedback to decide what to build. But they can look at that and say, okay, how fast did it take from David to actually onboard the product, and did the community that he joined help with that? For example, I post a question, hey, what's the best use case for product board? Someone replies to it, oh, here's what I did. I see it, and then the next day I implement what that person suggested. Well, that's an indicator that that community helped me on the product journey to get to a faster time to value, which is likely going to lead to me sticking around the company longer or sticking around the product longer. That's just one example from like thinking about how post after joining. Usually, if the company has a community that is made for existing customers versus prospects, and sometimes it's a blend of the two, but usually there'll be certain metrics that you look at to measure success. If it's existing, usually it's impact on either retention or like net promoter score. There's a few, might be a few other metrics there, but so really good point, right? Thanks for calling that out. Great. Okay, so getting on to how AI is changing the dynamics, let's look at support deflection as one example here. So previously, support deflection, it's like one of the largest ways to quantify community value. This is like 2015 to early 2000s or 2020s. I mean, even before this, right? You can probably as early as 2005, 2010, where this is like, there's a lot of classic examples out there where I think Microsoft with a forum was able to save like $4 million a year in the amount of cost it would be to have people who are on support, because the community would give feedback to each other on the forum. So usually the way you look at that is you put a value at like per a dollar equivalent for support tickets. One example we've seen is Autodesk use $25 a ticket as a way to calculate the ROI from support. So for example, someone has a question, hey, how do I do this in the product? Typically that'll go to support, and it would cost the equivalent of $25 for that to get answered effectively and solve that person's problem. Well, if community does that, then they can say, hey, this is worth $25 that the community solved. So if you end up having a bunch of these support tickets, thousands, times that by that 25 or $10, whatever your company decides it's valued at, that leads to a dollar equivalent for savings. So this is classic. If you're a professional community manager, you probably are familiar with this one. Now this is where it gets tricky. It's like, well, now you have Finn, which is from Intercom, and a lot of these other support agents who can digest your documentation, can effectively figure out and answer questions for you on your behalf, and for only $1 a resolution. So this is tricky, because now it says, wait a second, someone else is coming in here and solving a problem in a cheaper or like maybe more effective, potentially more effective way. And maybe not, but what this means, so the higher level, what this means is AI can now do more with less, which means a lot of some of the previous metrics, the way we thought about measuring ROI, might be not sufficient, which means we need to figure out other ways that we can drive value in a measurable way. So it's a hard place to be, but thankfully, there's another way to look at this, right? So in the last, call it 5 years or so, this conversation around transactional versus non-transactional tickets has come up. And this is some screenshots I have from like a Notion doc, but effectively transactional ones are like, hey, how do I reset my password? In which like there's a really clear answer, and you don't really need the community for that as much. Yes, it's great to have that and someone can give you the answer, but that's something that like an AI or a bot should easily be able to solve. It's like, hey, how do I do X, Y, Z? But where it gets more interesting for a community to come into play is when it's not a like a direct answer, but it's like advice, best practice. So someone asks, hey, what's the best way to structure roles and permissions for a 500-person team? You're going to have a whole discussion form around that, right? One person says, oh, well, we have like a 700-person team, and this is what we did. Someone else says, oh, I have a 300-person team. This is what we did. And then someone else says, oh, I have something exactly like you. Here's how we approach it. But, here's a few nuances, right? There's all these nuances that come up when it comes to advice and feedback and how to approach problems, that it actually doesn't make sense for AI to be the one who is doing that, because it doesn't have all the context that someone who's been in that role before has. So you end up in this case where there's still a lot of value derived from these types of Q&A and these like forum type of experiences. It's just the type of value that execs and everyone else is looking at is shifting a bit from this like transactional, almost like binary, hey, did it get answered, to like, how did this question actually lead to some outcome for this person? So an example, some more examples of these like non-traditional support or like peer-to-peer best practices, use case inspiration. Hey, how can you use this tool to get the outcome I'm looking for, right? That type of stuff, advice. And then some of the metrics you can think about for these about measuring is engagement with those advice or pieces of content that are related to like non-transactional types of interactions. So maybe it's views. It could be like eyes, actually interactions with that type of content. That's one thing we started to see being more common to measure. Customer success outcomes. This is always wonderful, right? Renewal expansion for people who are in the community versus out. This isn't quite that as tied to non-transactional as the first one. Sentiment and advocacy. This is an example I'll go into a little bit later. Product adoption, right? Like, does someone who interacts in the community and gets advice in some way, if that's checked, do they adopt the product faster than someone else? So trying to make these correlations are important. And then you also have to keep in mind that because the value that community brings is oftentimes not just within the community, but across other parts or departments, the relationships you have with other stakeholders of the company are really crucial to get right. Because if you don't have their buy-in to measure the way community interacts with that part of the company, then it's really hard for you to actually tell that story of, oh, this person did this and it led to higher product adoption. So it is tricky, and getting the right tools is hard. So this is very tricky, but it is where we kind of need to have the world move towards, because if we don't do this, then it's just harder for larger companies to justify $1 million+ budgets towards community. I'm gonna take a quick break. Look at the comments here. So Nina, you said here also more technical questions, issues of the platform being used. Right, good point. Yeah, that's definitely related to non-transactional, where it's just maybe a bot wouldn't work well. Really good thinking. And amen, Beth. Yes, this is why, one of the reasons why community will always be important. Nina, really good thought here. Companies who don't use chatbots support will lead in customer trust. Yeah, I agree with that. Right. I mean, I think there's probably some questions that that having chatbots makes sense, but for the majority of questions, I could see a world where it routes to a community where it's hey, the best thing for you to do to get this answer is ask our community. That's the type of workflow that I think is really smart. Okay, great. And it depends on the kind of bots. Yeah, great point, Nina, as well. Okay, so let's continue here. And this kind of comes back to this point I'm getting at, which is tracking and figuring out what to measure is necessary, but it's also not enough. So because doing more with less is this growing expectation for community managers. First of all, this is crazy because they're doing 3 to 5 jobs with 3 to 5 people. I mean, everyone's overworked. But the expectation of being more productive is still growing. And on top of this, there's increasing downward pressure from execs to say let's cut costs. And oftentimes, unfortunately, community teams are the first to go. And once again, also crazy because of how much value community drives. So you end up in this case where AI can do more with less, or helps you do more with less, at least in theory, which means you need to get creative with tracking and finding ways to prove ROI. But it's not enough because you're expected to handle more responsibilities. So it's not just hey, this is working well, but it's you have to do that across multiple responsibilities. And on top of that, you have this downward pressure from management. So it's a tricky place to be in. But I think that it may be scary. I think there's a big but wait here, in that it's actually making it harder for other growth channels too. So not just community, but it's making it trickier for other competitive types of ways to get either more customers or increase retention. For example, one channel is direct sales, right? SDRs, these people who are cold calling or outreach, whatever it is. AI bots are making these people much noisier. I think about all the DMs you get on LinkedIn or the spammy emails you get. Now that's automated, so that's making that channel, direct sales, much it's cheaper, which is making it more noisy. So no one's really responding to those messages. So if you're company CEO, you're thinking to yourself, all right, sales isn't working as well. Then you have content marketing in the same way. No one's really looking at your newsletters in the same way they used to. Tied to email, there's just so much of it because it's so easy to generate. SEO, it's changing. I mean, it's still relevant because people are asking chatbots. It's a different type of SEO, but it's still the concept of SEO. It's still relevant, but it's not quite as gameable and not quite as easy to get your SEO up as it once was. And then paid advertising, similar. It's just really hyper competitive. and really doesn't work that well. So you end up in this case where you have all these other channels that are also struggling. So companies are actually looking for new channels, other ways to get revenue and or maintain their existing customer base. And community happens to be one of actually the most appealing, which is interesting. So you have on one side, AI is making it, higher expectation. There's this downward pressure. Community manager overwork, but they need to do even more with less. On this other side, though, there's actually this increasing look and desire to invest in new channels that actually could lead to better outcomes for the company. And community actually could be a good one. And the big thing here is that like most of these value adds are still relevant even in the age of AI. I mean, maybe even 90% plus, but like, some of these, like the one I gave an example with is customer, these like answers each questions and support teams using it. Even that one, sure, that one might be less valuable, but there's still all these other ones that word of mouth, brand, getting referrals, being a valuable touch point. Trust is getting even more important in this world of AI where like everything feels more transactional. So you're willing to trust the brands that have a community more than those who don't. So regardless, despite that, there's still interest here. And the other thing that's interesting is like even the best companies we work with. So whether it's been public companies I've seen or even like fast growing, just some of the best companies in the world who have these customer communities, I'm always shocked that like most of them just aren't tracking and surfacing all the value that's being created. They may be really great at support, but they don't even think about the product implications. They may be really great at product and like the feedback, but they don't even think about how this could actually lead to more revenue. So all that said is like, despite there being less of a, despite there being some issues, there's more interest in this area, and there's a lot of potential for this area to still take off because even those who are doing really well with it aren't doing that well. So it's an interesting position where like if you can actually be in that top 5 or 10% of community builders who are able to track ROI and use the right tools and think about these problems, then you have the opportunity to like really introduce a game-changing channel for you and your company. So I think it's a really important piece here. It's like, despite some of the pressures, there actually is a lot of opportunity on the table here. And AI should also, not only that, but it should also help us surface some of the value created. So if all this is true, community teams may shrink because people say, oh, you can do more with less, but we'll see more companies start communities. So hopefully the overall number of jobs will either increase or stay the same, but I actually see that increasing. We'll see companies be able to tie more value to community, which will then lead to you actually being able to invest more in community because you can track the ROI, and then hopefully in a year or two, community teams will continue growing again. So it's a funny cycle here, but this is like what I think is going to happen here. So to summarize, despite threats of AI, other channels getting oversaturated, companies are turning towards community. AI can help do some jobs, but a lot still requires community managers, not just to do the work, but actually to like be the voice and like have the relationships across the company and know the tools well enough to actually prove the ROI the community is driving. This is a big opportunity because even the best teams are bad at it. So if you use AI, you'll be a hero. So there is a reason to stick around here. So now I'll check the chat one more time, and then we'll spend the last 3 to 4 minutes here just going into some examples of ways AI can help and what I call the 3 levels of ROI. There's different frameworks out there to think about these, but these are just ones I've seen being most helpful. Nina, thanks for the comment there. Something making sense. Piper, really good thought here. Folks may join a community if they have giveaways of product, and then community could be danger. Strong community isn't. Yes, because like giveaways are definitely like a part of the picture, but it's not. It's one of the dozens or hundreds of opportunities that a community has, and it's a great one, but it is just one. And then the last one, I think Beth asked a question in QA here. What's one invisible impact to your community that you love AI to help surface? Oh, this is great. This actually gets into the second piece I'm gonna get into right now, which is around like sentiment and like overall what people in your community are talking about your product and brand. And Bevy's actually working on or just launched a feature that enables like sentiment analysis of different forums, which is really powerful. So I'll show that off in a second, but because good question, Beth. Thanks for asking that. All right. So getting into it, we have 3 levels. So on the service level, it's like engagement, and think about the metrics that matter in the community. So it could be MAUs, retention of the community, not tied to the company. And then there's different types of engagement, posts, replies. And the hope is that these are actually indicators or a lead in a very tangible way to these like mid-funnel metrics. So for example, we talked about support already. hey, someone's engagement led to, support, which leads to something that is more directly in this third area tied to revenue, where it's like led to shorter time to value, for instance. So you kind of have to have this narrative where it's like this specific activity in the community or form of engagement led to this like mid-funnel metric, which is really tied to this revenue outcome. So without this initial type of engagement, that revenue outcome just doesn't happen. And if I want to be able to tell a story at these like 3 levels. So, and and that means that engagement is still the most important, because without engagement, you don't have the other benefits you have. So we'll go into a few examples of how we've seen that work. But first, you kind of need to, I know there's other kind of sub bullets here. I know we're going to have on time, so I'm going to kind of go through this a little fast. I did a big case study a couple of years ago. It was with a bank, and we pulled a lot of the data that they had of around their engagement in community. So to speed this up a little bit, we were able to find with my past company's product, Intros AI, able to find that there's much higher engagement and retention in the community if someone uses Intros AI, but that's a correlation, not causation, right? It's like, oh, it may not be because of that. So we went deeper, and effectively we had to prove not only is this correlation, but it is causation. So the way we did this, we separated 2 groups: those who used Intros AI, those who didn't, and we looked at their activity before Intros AI existed, before our product existed. We looked at their activity, and we found that those who were to become or to eventually use Intros AI were already 11% more active than those who didn't, which makes sense. If you're going to use my past product to connect with someone else in the community, then chances are that you're already going to be more engaged regardless. So that's interesting. But then we went deeper, and we found that after Intros AI was introduced, their engagement actually increased. I think it was increased, roughly 11.6%. So it increased 11.6% after they started using my product, versus if you didn't use the product, you actually decreased 16%. So the difference there is 27% in engagement. And the reason that's such an important metric is to show, hey, there's actually a difference created from this product, not just a correlation. I know that was a little technical, went a little bit in depth, but these are the types of stories that are really helpful to tell. Happy to kind of support it if you're at like a B2B company and you're running their community, you're thinking about these problems at the company. This is an area where I think it's really important to be able to effectively tell these narratives. So I did a poor job of that. But I know we're coming up on time, so to finish up in the next 30 seconds, a lot of this comes down to credibility. So this is still engagement in the community. This is still the level 1. You have to be able to tell a credible story. So even that noting of correlation versus causation shows you recognize, hey, just because people are engaged doesn't mean anything, at least in the eyes of the CEO. It means something, but it needs to be more than that. So ideally, you can tie that to mid-funnel indicators. This is what I mentioned earlier with sentiment analysis. When you recognize that certain engagement leads to certain types of, the overall vibe, effectively, vibe's the wrong word for it, but how people are talking about your company in the community. This is what people, CEOs love seeing this type of stuff. And then eventually you want to be able to tie that to revenue. One way of doing that, not the only way, is if your community is a first touch point on the marketing side or first touch point for prospects, and that person becomes a customer, a huge way to tie that to revenue. So with that said, we didn't get too much today, but that concludes the presentation. Feel free to reach out on Twitter. I'm the Brunch Guy, and on LinkedIn, just reach out, and I'm happy to either chat messages or whatever it is that I can do to support. So thank you so much, and Beth, I'll hand it back to you. This is good timing. That worked out well.
Thank you so much, David. Thanks everybody for popping in the chat as well, and sharing your thoughts and your concerns. I mean, it's so helpful, like I said, to hear from just a different perspective of like how you've seen ROI be proven with AI. I think that the skepticism is real in our industry. The nerves are real. We're already all working on small teams of 1 or 2, and with the added pressure, or I guess expectation, to like do more with AI, it's like, but then will you cut the rest of my team as well because I'll become too efficient? So anyway, I just really appreciate hearing all of this from a different perspective.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you.